Hey folks, this is a Hearthstone video. If you didn't hear, Blizzard sucks. There's really no way to put it. Does everybody at Blizzard suck? No, of course not. There are some great people at Blizzard, but there are a lot of crappy people at Blizzard too. I don't say this randomly. If you happen to miss the news so far, the state of California brought a lawsuit against Blizzard, which basically features 47 pages of just countless hostile work environment, sexual harassment, stories of just the most evil, comically vile absurdities you've ever heard. It's heartbreaking. It's disheartening. It's just crazy. I will put a link in the description to the lawsuit and the allegations, but it doesn't frankly end there. There's hundreds more stories cropping up on Twitter as well. It sounds like it's mostly been started and rooted in the World of Warcraft team, but it expands all across Blizzard. It probably expands all across gaming, maybe even just corporate entities in general. I don't know where it stops. But certainly Blizzard has a long list of crap in its history, and it's not like some new Activision thing. It's going back decades to people who were there since the very beginning of World of Warcraft and so on. I mean, maybe not all the way back to the 90s, but who knows? So I don't know what to say. It's awful. You need to know about it. I think you should read it. It will be uncomfortable. It will be heartbreaking, but it's important that we shine a light on these things and call out the behavior when we see it. So here's an attempt to do that. It's not hard to be good to people. I think it's actually easier to be good to people than it is to be bad to people. I mean, I don't know what to say. It's really hard to support Blizzard right now. I have a lot of thoughts about that, but this really isn't about me at this stage. So go listen to people, hear the stories, see how you can make a positive impact on the world. As for how this impacts our Hearthstone lives moving forward, for what feels like what little that matters, all the card reveals today seem to have gotten pulled. Blizzard pulled their card reveal. Content creators Ali Straza and Lieutenant Eddie have also pulled their card reveals, and PC Gamer pulled their card reveal. So don't expect to see any cards today. I don't know if that's going to happen tomorrow. Who cares? Card reveals are the most unimportant thing in the world when you hear about these sorts of stories. In light of all this, of course, it feels insane to monetize this video. I mean, good God. So I threw up a fundraiser instead. I've never done this before, so I hope it works. The charities for Child's Play, which is not particularly fitting for this news, but I searched through the Google charities or whatever, and I couldn't really find one that seemed to fit. Like, it just didn't have the knowledge or awareness there, and there's a limited selection on YouTube. So this is one that's close to me. Mrs. Kilbin, my wife, for those who don't know, is a registered nurse at our local children's hospital here, and she's relayed how important it can be for kids to have video games and these distractions while they're sick in the hospital. So I knew this one was one that was going to get some value, and it's probably close to a lot of our hearts as gamers. So, if you want to put some positivity into this, feel free to hit that fundraiser, or of course, find something else to donate to if it makes more sense for you. But I thought use this platform what little I could to enact some positivity out of this situation if we can. So on that note, I mean, it feels absurd really to talk about Hearthstone at some level, but just to keep the gears turning and have some semblance of normalcy in light of all this stuff, I did go ahead and include the full AMA as I had recorded it earlier. So feel free to watch that. If you don't feel like it, I totally get it. I understand. I don't either. So I recorded the rest of this like 6-8 hours ago. I don't know. But as I've read more and seen more reactions, it's become more and more disheartening. So if it seems like my energy picks back up here in a second, that's why. But it's there if you want it. If not, go read more stories. Go learn more about this and figure out how we can all be better. All right, so now I'll do my best to move on to other questions. This one from Toasty. regarding whether the Barons meta has been maybe received as a bit boring, or I think maybe the word there was supposed to be stale. Do the behind the scenes engagement stats match up with sort of publicly shared sentiment? And Ixar says engagement very rarely moves a noticeable amount from any one expansion or one balance patch. Engagement always trends on a line over time, and Barons hasn't moved that line up or down in a way that would make us think it was an outlier in some way. I would say we're happy but ready to try more things. That is very good news. I agree that for whatever reason, Barons felt a little flat. And I've been thinking about making a video for a while now about whether or not Hearthstone is lacking in innovation. It feels like a lot of the designs and keywords are all sort of just reflective of stuff we kind of had before, but with minor tweaks. Like Frenzy's sort of like Enrage, right? It's a little different, sure, but it's very, very similar in idea. And like even now, quest lines are basically quests with extra steps, literally. So, you know, it seems like there's an opportunity to really rock the boat in Hearthstone and get some attention. And I'll be honest, I think Stormwind designs seem way more engaging than Baron's designs so far. Quest lines are still pretty cool despite being, you know, reminiscent, but there's a lot of other interesting designs. So anyway, been contemplating different ways to release cards and events that change game rules in some minor way for a limited time. That's something I've been talking about for a long time, how I wish we didn't have stale metas, that there are ways to make cards and balance and interactions change without changing the cards themselves. I've talked about like a week with, you know, you start at 2 mana, or a week where spells cost 1 less, or, you know, whatever. Those are terrible ideas, right? Those would probably break a million things, but just some sort of game state tweaks. Heroes start with 40 health for a week, whatever it is, right? Something that just changes how we play. I think that would frustrate some people, but I think it would be really refreshing for others. So hopefully Blizzard can find a solution that's obviously way better than my terrible suggestions there. All right, so here's a big discussion on Ellucia. What about Ellucia? Pro players really hate Ellucia, like so much. I don't think this is a card anybody outside of pro players think about a lot. You know, in my experience, even at you know, mid to low legend to diamond 5, I feel like most of the time people play Ellucia, they just throw the game. But if you're playing, you know, things like very specific OTK decks like Demon Hunter, Ellucia can just totally shut you down. And good players can more skillfully use Ellucia to be disruptive, of course. So anyway, they all hate Ellucia. What are your thoughts on Ellucia? Ixar says, Ellucia, Dirty Rat, Ticketus, Mill Rogue, Treachery decks, etc. all fall in with similar buckets. Some players live for this style of mechanic. Without the existence of being able to ruin their opponent's strategy, the game is much less interesting to them. This is very true, because I even see this in YouTube stats. People like watching videos like this too, of like evil disruptive decks. It's clearly a pretty big population. Some people despise these mechanics because they don't like being messed with in a way that feels unfair, despite how powerful that thing might actually be. So the idea here is that a lot of these effects are actually quite weak, even if they're annoying. Our goal isn't to take all extreme emotions out of Hearthstone. If we did that, there might be nothing players hate, but there might also not be anything players love. In the case of meme cards like Ellucia, the goal is to have them in the game for people that love them, but keep the power level low enough that it doesn't feel like the only strategy you are playing against. Players should be able to play the game in the way they want, but if it's a way that is widely despised, they should be penalized for doing so, meaning that deck probably shouldn't be the most powerful one in the game or the most played. In cases where Ellucia or Ticketus is the most played or powerful card, or part of the most played or powerful decks, we strongly consider making a change. In the world where those cards exist outside of top tier decks, I think it's a good thing. There should always be a wide variety of experiences. When you start to shave all your highly emotional experiences off, you don't end up with a more fun game, you end up with a boring one. So that was a lot. I'll let you guys break that down. I think a lot of this argument is born out of Mark Rosewater, I think is his name, lead designer for Magic the Gathering. He's had a talk about like all his design lessons and stuff, and one of them is basically this, is that it's okay to have cards that players hate as long as they're having sort of an emotional reaction. If you make every card sort of soft and nobody hates a card, that means nobody else is going to love the card, which I think is reasonable. But also, I think Hearthstone is in a state of the game where we're in a maintenance sort of mode where I don't think people need like really awesome extreme experiences as much to have fun with the game. They're kind of inclined to play the game already, and it's actually the really powerful negative experiences that are likely to push them away. Now, I don't have any data on that, obviously. I can't see behind the scenes. That is purely speculation and theory just based on where we're at in the game. I hear that a lot, at least. You know, who knows how often people actually follow through with these threats, like, oh, if they don't nerf ticket us, I'm quitting the game, or Ellucia, or whatever, right? But that's my instincts, but they may be wrong. I don't know. XR could certainly have it right here, and he definitely has more data and access to what's happening to back up these claims. And, you know, also this is logic from one of the greatest game designers of all time, most people would say. So hard to argue some of these points. Okay, here's a question about Rush. How do you feel about Rush now that it's been around a while? Ixar says, love it. It's important to have damage from hand cards so that falling behind isn't a death sentence, but it's nice when those can be minions sometimes to promote more minion combat. The caveat is that if there's too much Rush, then minion combat doesn't matter at all. Players just launch damage from hand and board states don't matter. Tough to balance, especially when creating archetypes centered around Rush. And yeah, I actually agree with this pretty much wholeheartedly. I think Rush is also healthy, but it needs to be nuanced in some way, because otherwise initiative on board never really matters. If every minion is just getting traded right from hand and there's no like stat penalty or negative trade aspect to Rush minions, then you've got a bit of a problem. So, you know, a good thing in moderation is good, but I'm happy that Rush has become an evergreen keyword for sure. Any thoughts on a Hunter rework, creating a class-specific mechanic that every other class has at least one of? So this is a reference to the fact that there's no like overload or choose one or combo for Hunter. Ixar says no, would probably look at a class like Paladin or Shaman first. I like Hunter. It has one of the clearest class identities. That's fair. I don't think every class necessarily has to have a unique keyword or mechanic like that, but I do agree Hunter is pretty clear in what it's about. Going phase, beasts, death rattles often as well. There's quite a few plays and sort of mechanics that pop up for Hunter over and over again. So I do think Shaman is one of the classes that is the least clear, particularly their hero power still feels like a little wonky. Paladin, I mean, their base set is a little strange. It's core set now, so it kind of can change, but it does feel like the old classic Paladin basic set was like a weird mix of bad spells and secrets and stuff that weren't that great, and a lot of 4-mana cards that all competed with each other. So those are reasonable targets for class reworks for me, but a lot of people would say let's rework Priest again. Here's a question about card design. Ever thought about printing a legendary that lets you discover a 1-cost spell as a new hero power? I know some classes might be broken with that, but it would be cool to see. I've actually seen this pop up in custom cards a few times as well from you guys. Ixar says, I wonder how excited people would be to play against Devolving Missiles Hero Power Mage. He has a point. That would be pretty terrifying. I could see it working, but we'd have to pick the right class, something that is mostly proactive rather than repetitive removal. Sometimes when Ixar responds to questions like this, I think he's teasing that like this is on the way. I don't think that's the case here. I think he just acknowledged that this was a reasonable enough idea that it could pop into the game. And I actually think I agree. All right, so this one's sort of horrifying for me. Would the team ever consider doing a collab? For example, a collab with Naruto or Dragon Ball? Is something like that possible? Well, I love Dragon Ball. I mean, it's one of my favorite properties, but I would hate to see it in Hearthstone. My God. We've discussed licensing another IP into Hearthstone, but it would have to be a really large event to make sense from a business perspective. Not sure we're willing to do the Naruto expansion quite yet. I can dream, though. Doing some tie-ins with Overwatch or Diablo is much more likely because we can do something smaller. I think the Hearthstone expansions in particular should stay true to the Warcraft lore. You know, if it's like a Battlegrounds or Tavern Brawl, whatever, right? Even if it was like a temporary duels hero set, I'd probably be okay with all that, right? But I feel like you don't want, what are we on, like 7 years of Hearthstone history now to just kind of all be the exact same thing and then have a random Overwatch expansion. I mean, maybe if it was an Overwatch expansion that was, you know, meshed into the Warcraft universe, so you had like, Reinhardt was just like a big knight dude, but he didn't have like futuristic armor and stuff. He had like medieval armor. I might be okay with that. I could like live with it, I think, as long as it fit within the worldscape of Warcraft and fit within the confines of the time period and all that sort of stuff. I could live with it if it was like reskinned. But Dragon Ball or Naruto expansion, I don't know what I'd do. I think I'd stop playing for an expansion or maybe a rotation. I think it would just drive me crazy. I don't know. I think it just would like ruin the game for me. What do you guys think? Would you welcome it or hate it? All right, this is one I complain about like literally every day. Is the random hero portrait feature going to be available soon? Ixar says, I've seen slides for it, but I don't know when it's coming. I'll have to check in on it since I haven't been involved personally. It's making progress. We have so many hero portraits. Manually selecting one at a time for a deck is silly to me. It makes me feel like I just have a favorite and then I never want to get more. So I think it makes a ton of sense to have it random and then you just get to enjoy all your hero portraits instead of just one. All right, here's a question about mechanics and coming back. How do you evaluate what mechanics to bring back if you ever do? Curious how you evaluate that. We rarely do this. In the past, we left keywords in standard or brought them back because we felt like there was room to have more of them. Nowadays, we view ourselves at about the limit for like evergreen keywords. For things like hero cards, quests, or no duplicate cards, they are usually just so high impact that they end up defining a lot of what the game is when they're around. We've determined we like them, but not as an always on sort of thing, in the same way that we like individual archetypes like Rush Warrior or Ramp Druid or whatever, but that doesn't mean we are happy if that strategy is in every expansion. So rather than make only some hero cards or quests impactful and do them always, we've opted to make them more impactful when we do them, but just take breaks. And I'm certainly cool with that. I mean, I don't want Highlander to always necessarily be a thing in Hearthstone or hero cards to always be the dominant strategy in Hearthstone, as long as we don't forget about them. Although I would certainly like to see a new card type of some sort or mechanic on the level of hero cards or quests be introduced to Hearthstone as well. All right, finally here, a question about the type of audience things are designed for. Basically, is Hearthstone content geared towards enfranchised players or new players? And Ixar says, these days, probably the more engaged audience. The new player population is just not nearly the size as it was in year 1 or year 2. So I think it's appropriate to design in a way appropriate for our actual audience. That said, we still try to keep the game approachable. And this kind of hints at what I was talking about earlier, right? It's I think most players at this stage are fairly locked in, and it takes a lot of disruption to sort of push them out of the Hearthstone ecosystem. So glad to see, at least from a design standpoint, adding a little bit more complexity and, assuming players have sort of a base level of competence or knowledge is there on the design side of things. I think that's welcome. If Hearthstone never increased in complexity, I think a lot of people would get more bored with it. So hopefully this is kept in mind in the future as well. All right, so this is, real interesting one, I'd say, for something pretty simple. Any update on the main menu revamp? Ixar says, main menu changes are pretty light. Just putting mercenaries and battlegrounds on the start screen should come in a patch before the Stormwind mini set. So, couple things to take away here. Number one is, does that mean mercenaries is coming before the Stormwind mini set? Or will it just be a button put in place that's sort of grayed out until mercenaries is released? I don't know. Go ahead and theorize there. Secondly, you may notice something. Where are duels in arena? The duels in arena just not gonna get a button on the start screen. I think that's tells us something about priorities here for game modes. Clearly, arena and duels are not the favorites, but they're expecting mercenaries to be on the level of battlegrounds as far as significance is concerned, or perhaps along a different vector as far as difference is concerned, because arena and duels do have the same basic combat mechanism of normal, standard, or wild Hearthstone. They're all about playing cards from hand, manipulating the battles manually on the battlefield. They have differences in structure, but the gameplay is identical, more or less. And Battlegrounds, of course, is auto battles, very different structure. You don't come in with a deck. It feels very different. And Mercenaries is also going to be way different. It's not going to utilize your cards, much like Battlegrounds doesn't utilize traditional cards either. So I don't know if this is, you know, so much a priority thing or a difference thing or a popularity thing, but still pretty clear that Mercenaries is going to be a big deal, much like Battlegrounds is a big deal. And I think this really, really enforces the Hearthstone as a platform sort of thing where, you know, right now it's play button takes you to normal Hearthstone and then modes get you to everything else. Now it's probably going to say like normal Hearthstone, Battlegrounds, and Mercenaries. I might still say play. I don't know if that's going to be considered the default or not, but certainly Battlegrounds and Mercenaries getting higher billing here as distinct and really important main menu type modes, which I'm actually fine with this. I think some people are threatened by this. I think it's okay, even if you know, it's probably going to hurt me to split the player base off more and more so that I get less viewers on standard format videos. I still think it's good for Hearthstone as a whole and a potential to bring new people into the ecosystem, which frankly might move over to normal Hearthstone at some point as well. All right, so that wraps it up for this AMA. Of course, always curious to hear your thoughts. I would absolutely encourage you to check some of those links in the description to keep yourself informed on all the absolutely absurdly vile things that happen at Blizzard. It's disheartening, it's uncomfortable, but I think it's important to point it out. So, and I should note, please feel free to use my comments as a place to discuss all this stuff. I'm not gonna shut you down. I'm happy to have people talk about it, get their thoughts out, share as much as it helps. So please feel free to be respectful, but talk and discuss in the comments below. That said, I want to thank you as always for watching, and until next time, game on.